So yeah, give me a little something from your side of the mic.
Oh man, well, little something.
Little something. I know. Yeah.
Just ease into
Boy,
it.
it really makes me uncomfortable how like fucking prevalent like your grunting is on the other side of this microphone. It's really
Be sure to do lots of that during the episode.
Yeah, no, please don't.
We're taking the pace that most podcasts said are 2 to 3 times the length of ours.
Yeah, exactly. So you're welcome, listeners. You're welcome, and welcome back to another episode of The Purpose-Driven Dude, the podcast that focuses on dudism, the slowest growing religion in the... Did we decide world last week? Probably.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, we're just going to make that claim until somebody tells us otherwise, I guess.
I mean, I'm fine just to keep it there until refuted, and probably just keep saying it regardless.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hey, you know what? If the president can do it, so can we.
I can bloviate with the best of them, damn it.
Exactly.
Because I'm an American.
I'm an American, goddammit. I didn't watch my buddies die face down in the muck so that people can tell me that I am not, in fact, the slowest growing religion in the world.
That's what we do.
Yes, so, by the way, I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your other host, Alex.
How you doing, Alex?
Man, I am okay. Apologies in advance to listeners if you hear a slight scratch in my voice. I've had a little bit of a cold today.
If you cough, you can always cut it out of the podcast.
Yes, with my pro editing skills. Hashtag pro editing skills.
We haven't even fucking edited a video or a fucking.
Well, they didn't know that until you said it.
No, I think it's brilliant. We haven't even tried editing yet. That's mostly my fault.
Well, we'll get to it eventually, or we won't. I mean, we might just throw it online. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? There's probably going to be very, very little editing involved in this podcast.
Yeah.
So for anybody who is not familiar, dudism being a religion that is based primarily upon the Big Lebowski. Yes, that is right, the movie. And also numerous tenets from Taoism, Zen Buddhism, and pretty much anything you damn well please.
Yeah, it's pretty easygoing as religions go. So yeah, and we're
kind
here.
of the only thing that we're really militant about is just being really easygoing.
Yeah, I would say taking it easy is about the only thing that is probably a unifying thread of this religion.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I mean, it's one sort of things that probably is at best loosely defined as a religion.
Hey, we are recognized. I believe, I think it's 13 states now.
Nice.
I think it's 13 states.
And we're definitely good here in California, regardless.
Yeah, no, we're good in California, so you know what? That's what really matters because we both live here.
Because West Coast, Best Coast. I mean,
yeah,
obviously.
No, exactly. I mean, literally, like West Coast, Best Coast in my short list of places I'm willing to live.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Three of the 4 states that I'm willing to live in are on the West Coast.
I'm taking it the 4th is just Hawaii, so it's kind of West Coast.
No, actually, it's the other direction. I'd be willing to move to Colorado. And, I can still smoke weed.
Yeah, this is true. I mean...
Hawaii, I'm just not good with the whole ocean concept. I've got nothing against Hawaii or Hawaiians. Like, fucking love you guys. Anybody who can make Spam taste good is a goddamn hero, in my opinion. But... I'm not going to live on an island because I would be surrounded by, like, my second biggest fear.
Water.
Not water, but the ocean. Because pretty much everything in there, it has evolved to, murder me.
I mean, that's fair.
I mean,
get that.
It's kind of like, it's wet Australia.
It's Australia, but not a continent.
Yeah, exactly, and covers a much greater territory.
The fathomless deeps, man. It's like Lovecraftian. So
there's a reason that all of Lovecraft's horrible monster gods live in the ocean.
They come from space and then live in the ocean.
And except for Nyarlathotep, he's underneath Egypt.
True. But he's like the outlier.
Yeah, I was about to say, most of the rest of them are under the ocean. So, don't go in the ocean. Cthulhu will eat you.
Yeah, the ocean is terrifying and should be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, and I mean, I live on the West Coast, so we have, seriously, someone got eaten by, a goddamn great white shark, last week.
Yeah.
So...
It's not uncommon.
Yeah. No.
And there's also a lot of garbage in the Pacific Ocean, so...
Yeah,
it's a little gross.
It's got two of the biggest industrial powers in the world on either side of it, so we've kind of officially fucked that puppy up.
Yeah.
So let's
so on that happy note.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's get into the episode, because this is actually 2/3 of this episode is actually going to be fairly upbeat.
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, and we are getting to it eventually. I mean,
actually, this episode I'm kind of excited about. We're going to be continuing with the format that we sort of stumbled upon last week. I think it's working for us at the moment. So until somebody says otherwise,
or until we start getting some excellent fan mail or letters, if you have questions for us.
Shit, that's what I forgot to do. Set up the email.
Oh yeah. As soon as we get that set up, dear listener, you will be able to submit questions to us.
I thought I was forgetting something.
Well, and you know what? I still need to do a Facebook page, so we'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll get around to it. Yeah, we haven't even fucking dropped an episode, so who
gives a shit?
All right. So with that being said, let's take it away. We're going to dive right in this week into Notably Doodly.
Notably Doodly.
I don't know if we're actually going to have a sound cue for this ever.
But we can introduce it like we do.
Yeah, exactly. Notably Doodly. That's a little too sexy.
Notably Doodly. Or, you know what? Our dear listeners could just sort of insert a sound cue as they feel, fit to do.
Seriously, I don't know, an air horn or, or a fucking, put in a fucking Credence chord or something,
Credence would be appropriate. I mean, I personally am a fan of that, rap horn, which I'm queuing up on my phone right now. So just, insert at your discretion.
Oh God, please don't. I hate that noise so much.
Now I have something to edit in.
Oh boy.
With my pro-ass editing skills.
I will never listen to one of our episodes.
It's okay. It's weird to hear yourself talk,
Yeah, I don't even listen to the other podcasts.
Just loose them into the ether and forget about them.
Occasionally I check my download numbers and see how I'm doing.
Just enough to satisfy the vanity, but not enough to actually engage.
Yeah, exactly. People like me. I don't know what I sound like.
They either like you or they hate you. I mean, one or the other. Tell your friends, tell your enemies.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, I don't know how many people are hate listening to my other projects.
That's how you know you made it, is when you have hate listeners, I feel.
Yeah, I was about to say, I haven't received any death threats on iTunes yet, so there is that. There was the very brief Twitter war with somebody else who actually shared the same podcast name as one of my other projects. But
I remember that. I got in on that one. That was fun.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of fun. It was kind of fun, and ultimately weirdly boring.
Yeah, it was fun until it was dumb.
Yeah, and then it was fun until 10 minutes into it, and then I realized just how fucking stupid it was.
Yeah. As with most online arguments, I suppose, really, at the end of the day.
It wasn't even an argument.
No, it wasn't really, it was mostly just us kind of dogpiling on that guy. Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, I almost feel bad, but not really.
I don't.
No, he was kind of a dick about it, so. Shout out to that guy. If you're listening to this one, suck a dick.
Insert wanking gesture in your imagination.
I'll put some music in there. It'll be fine. Sound cue time.
So, I'm going to take a hard right out of this conversation about dick sucking and go into Notably Doodly.
Take a hard right about talking about our wangs to talking about something...
To talking about something that I really don't want associated with my wang.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, it just so happens that we are recording this episode... Oh, whoop, almost knocked over my second beer. Just so happens that we are talking about this on February 19th. Which is President's Day, but I'm not going to fucking talk about that.
No.
I had you going there for a second.
You juked him. You zagged. He zagged super hard.
I zagged hard there. Turns out today is the 50th anniversary of the premiere of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. A fact that fills my heart with genuinely sincere joy. Because Fred Rogers, I'm not even sure was actually a human being, because human beings are not this good.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck it. Like, the best human beings I know are not this good.
Yeah. Most people are rat bastards at least sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like it's a core tenet of our. A sect of our religion, admit you're an asshole. Anyway, Fred Rogers, host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Fred Rogers was born in, and I just realized I actually accidentally did not write down his birth date. Whoops.
Quickly Google. To the Oracle. Consult.
It doesn't matter. So, Fred Rogers, great American hero, host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He actually was not originally going to be a media personality in his early life. He actually went to seminary to become a Presbyterian minister. Decided to get into television in the 60s because, and this is a great quote, decided to get into television because, quote, because I hated it so and thought there's some way of using this fabulous instrument to nurture those who would watch and listen.
Nice.
Hot damn, off to a great start, Mr. Rogers. Well done, Fred. He originally actually, and I didn't know this, being a Fred Rogers fan, I didn't know this, originally worked for NBC. Before he moved over to public television, but decided that commercial networks' reliance on advertising and merchandising undermined its ability to educate or enrich young audiences. So he left them in 1967, would go on to what was a local public station, and then later was put onto the national stage with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on February 19th, 1968. Very first day, Fred Rogers walking in, gently singing, taking off the overcoat, putting on the sweater, which, by the way, all of his sweaters knitted by his mother.
That's adorable.
And for 33 years, nearly 900 episodes, revolutionized concepts in children's media and education. Really known for one of my favorite things about children's education. I don't think I've said this before. I have a degree in theater. I studied children's theater a lot when I was getting my degree, and it always enraged me to read and or see children's media, which basically treats children like they're dumb and you can't talk to them and explain things to them.
Yeah, and I always hated that too.
And that was the beauty about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was he would talk so plainly about subjects that a lot of people would shy away from. There's a very notable episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood where he's seen addressing the concept of divorce and talking to children very plainly about, this thing that these children might at some point have to deal with in their lives. And it was just so beautiful. Also, if you get a chance, go on YouTube, look it up. I've watched it so many times. I fucking cry every single time I watch it. is his 1969 address to Congress,
yes,
asking for funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the public broadcasting system. Yeah, just one of them. Like, he shamed a Republican into providing funding for public media and children's education. It was brilliant. So he did that in 1969. By 1971, so from 1968 to 1971, public broadcasting's budget increased from $9 million to $22 million, almost solely because of his efforts and because of his talks with Congress, which had a very, very important place in my life growing up.
Oh, same. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the 90s, and where I grew up, I was watching a show called Wishbone. I watched Wishbone. I wasn't actually sure. I knew it was shot in Texas. I wasn't sure how national.
Oh yeah, no, that made national PBS. Yeah. I totally was. I loved that show.
Yeah, loved that show. I mean, when I was in high school, Saturday morning PBS was my fucking life.
Sure.
I would get up, I would go to my martial arts class in the morning, I would come back home, I would watch In the Kitchen with Julia and Jacques, America's Test Kitchen, This Old House and New Yankee Workshop, Nature, and if I was lucky, there'd be an episode of Nova on.
Good old Nova, yeah. Which is still running, I think, right?
Nova, Nature, and This Old House are all still going. America's Test Kitchen is still going as well.
Yeah.
And I still watch those whenever I get the chance. I thank my lucky stars every day for Mr. Rogers and the fact that his efforts had such a huge impact on me. And the thing that really amazes me about him is, in real life, Fred Rogers was very similar to his on-screen persona. I'm going to trust you to edit out the pause I take here to get a drink.
Yeah, sure. Or I'll just fill it with inane chatter.
Well done. There's an amazing story about him where at one point he was in an elevator going to work one day, and he ran into a young man who had grown up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who began talking to him, asked him how he was doing, and thanked him for the influence he had on his life growing up. And they fell into talking, and this young man admitted to Fred Rogers that he had been going through a rough patch since recently his grandfather had passed away. And Fred Rogers dropped everything, sat down with this guy, and just listened to him for a while. And at the end of the conversation, the young man apologized to him for keeping him away from his appointments and his business of the day. And his response was, "Sometimes you're right where you need to be." Which is one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever heard, is that, in this crazy, fucking human comedy that we find ourselves in, that there are these people in the world who really are there in the right time and place, and are there for the greatest good of the people around them.
I mean, and talk about exemplification of like a Taoist principle too. Like, I mean, he was firmly in that moment. He realized the most important thing he could be doing at that moment was listening to that guy, just listening. And I mean, I think that probably also comes back to the minister training, I'm sure.
Absolutely, I think that was obviously a very big influence on his life and his personality as well. Oh, hey, your upstairs neighbors are tap dancing again.
Yeah. Might have to try to edit that one out.
Yeah, clogging, as it were.
But yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, I grew up with him too. And like, I've heard some crazy stories like that too. I can't remember the details of it. This is totally off the top of my head. But I remember hearing a story about Mr. Rogers where and I can't remember the exact details, but somebody came to him, a similar situation, I feel, for like an issue of some kind, and he like literally just like invited them over to his house, and they like stayed with him for like days, and it was just like out of the kindness of his heart, like him and his wife put him up, and like just sort of like helped him through whatever they were going through at the time.
Literally might be the most wholesome, purest man who ever walked the face of this planet. Another story that I really love that I read today, and I had not heard this one before, was, so he was known for this like very quiet patience in all situations that he found himself in, and at one point, for the concept of an episode, of a segment in an episode, he wanted to install a microphone in his fish tank because he wanted to record the sounds of his fish eating.
Huh.
I don't really know the context that this happened in. It's kind of off the wall.
It's a little odd, but yeah.
Yeah, but he invited this marine biologist onto the show who actually did the installation. And this man, in turn, got frustrated because while they were trying to film the segment, the fish weren't eating. And rather than recut or reshoot the scene, Rogers actually insisted that it remain in the episode as a lesson on the appreciation of patience and silence.
And again, bringing it back to Taoist principle.
That very Taoist principle.
Stillness, quietude.
Yeah, exactly. And so... just to wrap this segment up, I've got a few quotes from Fred Rogers, who I think really exemplifies not Christianity or Taoism or even Dudism, but just like some quotes that really spoke to me as a Dudist. My first one, this one moved me very, very much today, was: mutually caring relationships require kindness and patience, tolerance, optimism, joy in the other's achievements, confidence in oneself, and the ability to give without undue thought of gain. Also said, another one, which I think everyone in this world needs to listen to right now: there are 3 ways to ultimate success. The first way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. And the third way is to be kind. And finally, one of the greatest gifts you can give anybody is the gift of your honest self. So, with that...
well... I was going to throw in one little thing.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Well, because I actually had the distinct pleasure of meeting Fred Rogers one time. And
I have never heard this story.
Yeah, and it was just very briefly. So when I was in high school, I was in marching band. Okay. And our marching... Well, actually, I think it's the high school as a whole, but most of the people from the band volunteered for this, where we went down to Pasadena to help decorate one of the Rose Parade floats. Actually, you know what it was? It was Rotary Club, because I was in like junior Rotary.
Gotcha.
And we went down, and it just so happened that year, Fred Rogers was the Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade. Oh. And it was like a year or two before he died. Like, he was very old.
Would have been, because he passed away in 2003.
Yeah, and I think it was like 2001 or 2002, maybe.
Yeah,
And he was very old, but he came around like on a little golf cart. He was being driven around, so just looking at the floats being decorated. And just got to like...
I don't know why the image of Fred Rogers in a golf cart brings me so much joy.
It was a very cool image. And like, yeah, he kind of came around and like he like waved and like we waved and he paused for a minute. Didn't really get a chance to talk to him, but did get a chance to like kind of at least sort of meet him, in that regard. And that was awesome. Because I mean, like I grew up with it too. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was definitely one of the shows on PBS that I watched like religiously as a kid.
Oh yeah.
That along with like you mentioned Lamb Chop and like Reading Rainbow.
Oh yeah. No, we should talk about we should do
LeVar Burton or
well, LeVar Burton would be pretty awesome too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking of the lady from Lamb Chop.
Oh, was it Shirley?
Shirley?
Was it Shirley?
Shirley or Sherry? One of the two.
Yeah.
I think it was Shirley.
I think it was Shirley. I'm just blanking too. But
oh boy, I'm gonna have to not make myself an idiot in this moment.
We'll double around on this other particular doodly person
because that two other very doodly personages who just occurred to us there.
Yeah, I mean PBS is kind of ripe with these sort of people. I feel.
Yeah, I know. We've already got a plan to do almost an entire episode about Julia Childs. So.
This is true.
We'll just make our way through. Norm Abrams. Yeah, let's do it.
It's like sure, just dig in. Yeah. So Mr. Rogers. Oh yeah, dude, like Norm Abrams for sure. But that's the thing, Mr. Rogers, real near and dear to my heart as well. And couldn't actually really think of a better person to do, especially on Today for that.
It's like when I saw that, I was like, well, search over. This is happening.
Good call.
I had a few other candidates for a Notably Doodly this week, but this one had to happen. It just had to. So
wonderful.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Raise a glass to
Fred Rogers. I know you didn't drink, but you know what? You're a goddamn hero and a patriot, and
you probably wouldn't judge us for doing so.
Yeah, I was about to say you wouldn't judge me for raising an oat soda in your honor.
Indeed.
So thank you, Fred Rogers, for everything you did and for what your legacy continues to do.
Absolutely. Greatest of gratitude.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. So, moving on.
Moving on from being a little sappy about Fred Rogers and our collective childhoods.
I was about to say I got a little emotional there at the end there. I was really getting into that one.
Oh man, I know. It's
I almost feel like we should have done an entire episode about him.
We could always double around at some point, it could be fun.
I was about to say, we might revisit this one at some point.
We'll see what the fans have to say. Maybe if they clamor and demand.
If you want to hear me get super sappy about Fred Rogers again, let me know.
Yeah, if you want to hear a couple 30-something-year-old men cry.
If you want to hear a 30-something cry about Fred Rogers, you shoot me an email.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be happy to dig into our psyches a bit.
Exactly. Okay.
But this does bring us around to our main segment of the day. And for this time around, we're going to try something a little bit different. We discussed this before. We are going to go ahead and start tackling the great dudes of history.
Yes.
So you can actually find kind of like a list of these on the Dudism website. We're not limiting ourselves solely to that list by any stretch.
No, I don't think Julia Childs is on there yet, but
she damn well should
be. If you're listening, Oliver Benjamin, Julia Childs.
Yeah. And
Fred Rogers.
And Fred Rogers, for fuck's sake. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, seriously.
So we're going to go ahead and we're going to maybe make this like a once monthly kind of thing, I think is the plan.
Yeah, once monthly or something along those lines. If we don't come up with a good topic.
I mean, it's also, a deep well to go to.
Exactly. It's like we might have more of these than we have actual episodes in the end, but you know what? Yeah. We're just going to get after it.
We'll see how it goes. But we figured the best place to start for this particular little series that we're going to be doing, just on and off series, would be Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, by all accounts.
Absolutely.
Kind of the archetype, I guess, of basically everything we're fucking rambling about at this point. So,
yeah.
More or less.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, him and, well, I mean, I guess we both come to this from a little bit different perspectives philosophically, but I think Lao Tzu is the one that we definitely both share just intrinsically.
And I think you would be hard pressed to you can't talk about Taoism without talking about Lao Tzu.
Oh well,
that's just straight up the truth.
Not. I mean, without Lao Tzu, there is no Taoism.
Exactly.
As we know it. I mean, the concept of the Tao existed before Lao Tzu, but he's the one who really codified the beliefs surrounding the pursuit of the Tao as the center, as the intrinsic form of life and being.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, we'll kind of go into the stories around him. I'd like to just quickly, again, like I did last episode, shout out my research tools for this, because I'm a good librarian and I like to cite my sources. And we'll be including these, of course, in the show notes on iTunes, I feel. But first off, another big shout out to Taoistic.com. A pretty invaluable source. The translations there are solid, but also of particular use to us here on the show is that they break down Taoism by topic. So you can get a list of all the chapters on a specific topic. Definitely makes working with the Tao Te Ching quite a bit easier. I mean, not to say that it's difficult. It's not a very long book.
It's not a long book. It's not necessarily a difficult book to read, but it definitely helps to have somebody who can give you some perspective.
Exactly.
As you're going into it.
And again, chop it up thematically, which is a huge help.
Yeah, I was about to say, that definitely is a big help to me, who can't get my fucking brain screwed on straight to, even remember, like, goddamn things about Fred Rogers, much less a Chinese text from the 4th century BC.
Exactly. So, a big shout out to Taoistic.com. The other source that is going to be different from last week, I am using the Dude Te Ching again, which I'll probably be quoting a little bit from later. But also...
which, by the way, I know, Oliver Benjamin probably, it doesn't give a fuck. But if you get a chance to check out the Dude Te Ching, it is available on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And that is the Dude Te Ching by Oliver Benjamin. You can get it both on Kindle and... physical.
Yeah, I have a physical copy. If you feel so inclined,
I have a digital copy. Yeah. So hey, we got all our bases covered.
Well, and I would highly recommend if you're thinking about dropping a few bucks on that particular book, definitely pick up the new annotated edition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's got new essays for each chapter.
And Oliver Benjamin actually did his own translation of the Tao Te Ching, separated from Dudism, and it's actually a pretty remarkable translation in its own right.
I mean, I've read a few, I guess now basically 3 different translations. I've been working my way through the Dude Te Ching. It's actually my personal favorite, just because I find it the most accessible.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny to go through the Dudism side, and sometimes it's more insightful than you might think, maybe. But
it's a weirdly insightful religion.
It's a weirdly insightful one, but the actual Tao Te Ching translation, like the next source I'm about to mention, actually comparatively, the Dude Te Ching is way more accessible because I work at a library. I'm an academic librarian, and we have a study copy of the Tao Te Ching, which is exactly what you think. It's almost like a study Bible. It has footnotes and endnotes and really intense breakdowns.
It's almost more a textbook than a religious text.
And they'll probably make appearances here and there throughout the show, just because there's some very useful kind of background information in there.
There are definitely people who know more about this than we do, so we might refer to them and defer to their translations and judgment as we move along.
And I mean, Oliver Benjamin being one of them.
Oliver Benjamin definitely being one of them. The Doodly Llama, as it were.
But this guy, Wing-Sit Chan, his translation, it's actually called The Way of Lao Tzu, and Tao Te Ching is the subtitle. It is an incredibly valuable book. It's a little pricey. It's about $30. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out and buying it, but if your local library carries it, plug in your local library here, as a good librarian would.
Also, patronize your local library.
Absolutely patronize your local library. But if it's available at your local library or at your local community college or whatever is nearby that might carry it, I would recommend checking it out, especially if you want a bit of a deeper dive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you could, again, it's more like a textbook, but it's definitely kind of designed for maybe a religious studies class, But this guy is, I wouldn't go so far as maybe say the preeminent scholar, but he is very good.
This is an in-table book, whereas, sorry Oliver, You might describe the Du De Ching as more like your bathroom edition. It's the one you keep where you just pick it up and you can read a sentence or two.
Get a chuckle. But again, it's I almost think of that more as like a utilitarian copy. Like I read that one basically daily, the Du De Ching. This
never leaves my side. I've always got my Kindle with me.
So. There you go. Yeah, and I make a point of reading it pretty much daily. The academic one, though, I will occasionally read just to get a little bit further insight on a chapter, but I definitely don't read it end to end. Because it gives you historical context. That's probably the best thing, is that it'll give you historical context and also context on various scholars who have studied and read and reread and really, dug in deep into Taoism. And who've dug into like original texts. It gives you context on their thinking too, which can subtly change meanings here and there of certain phrases. So again, if you want nuance, this is the book for you. If you want something far more accessible, and again, my personal preference, go with the Du De Ching. And if you don't want to spend any money at all, shit, man, look at Taoistic.com.
Yeah, if you look at Taoistic.com, I'm pretty sure there are also free or like 99-cent copies that you can get on like Amazon through Kindle or whatever the hell Barnes & Noble does.
And look, it's public domain.
Yeah, I was about to say Project fucking Gutenberg.
They have one, yeah.
No,
it's hard to read, I'm not going to lie. But it is there.
It's free.
Project Gutenberg, yeah. I mean, look, I love Project Gutenberg, but sometimes their translations
are doing good work, but yeah.
But look, I'm a librarian. I'm not going to advocate going and buying a book if you can get it for free. Come on. Like, that's not my way.
Patronize your local public library.
Yeah, and this study edition I firmly got from the library. I did not.
Former library aide, patronize your local fucking libraries.
Seriously, it's the best resource that you probably haven't thought about in at least a decade, but dude, fucking check it out.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. So, real quick, before we get into Lao Tzu's ideas, I really want to touch briefly on the concept of the historical Lao Tzu, just to give kind of like a context of where he was coming from.
Absolutely.
So Lao Tzu actually, I found out today, is a little bit anachronistic of a translation.
Basically means old boy or like old master.
Old master, that's what it translates as. But Lao Tzu, which we commonly refer to him as, is actually like a pretty anglicized version of it, and it actually comes from the Chinese Lao-Tze, which is actually a bit more accurate. We're kind of seeing this. Both of us are white boys, by the way.
Yeah, my pronunciation is going to be fucking shitty.
Appalling. And I apologize in advance.
My Chinese is not anywhere close to anything.
It's a running fucking joke on one of my other podcasts how bad my pronunciations are of a lot of non-English terms, and I just apologize in advance if I screw any of this up.
Yeah, look, people argue that I don't pronounce many English words correctly, so...
Yeah, exactly. I'm from Oklahoma. Yeah. I don't say shit right.
And I talk with such a California accent, and I can't even hear it myself, but I just roll shit together.
The other day, I was trying to figure out if it was Ouroboros or Ouroboros. I've heard it both ways.
Both legit in my mind, but I'm sure there's a correct way.
I like Ouroboros. I think it rolls off the tongue a lot better.
Sounds exotic.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then I actually had the conversation with the person who was at the bar with me, because I was ordering a beer called this, and the bartender passed the beer to me and went, "One Ouroboros," and I went, "Oh fuck!"
I had a similar conversation at work the other day on an equally obscure word, I feel, because a couple of classes at the school that I work at are teaching classic Greek plays, and a teacher came up to me and asked for our copy of Antigone. And
oh God! I knew it. I knew that was where you were going to go.
And I had to gently correct her to Antigone.
Here is your copy of Antigone.
Yes. Might want to lock that one in before you get up in front of a class and talk about it.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, exactly. No, my significant other, Liz, of Your Fave is Problematic fame. Go listen to it. It's awesome.
Indeed.
So she was a freelance stage manager for a long time, and she was working with a company in Pasadena who were doing a production of Shakespeare's Pericles, and the number of calls they had to field for people wanting to buy tickets for Pericles was
just get your Pericles right over here.
Yeah, I know. For some reason, I always associate that with testicles.
Oh, it sounds a lot like testicles.
And I'm just like imagining this Shakespeare play where everybody's got giant swinging dicks, like actual Greek theater.
Right, like the actual thing, yeah.
And it just made me so happy. I laughed about that for like 15 minutes when she told me about that.
But that's the thing. When it comes to classic Greek stuff, that's something I can help you with. When it comes to talking about classic Chinese literature, not so useful.
I am a very poor linguist on a good day. So I, once again, just, tangent aside, I apologize. Lao-Tze was actually, is considered, as you said, to be the father of Taoist philosophy as we know it. Not his actual name, but an honorific title.
Almost certainly, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are like 15 different claims as to what his actual name was. Most give his family name as Li.
I've seen that,
where a lot of Chinese people of that name are actually legitimately claiming heritage to one of the fathers of one of the most amazing philosophical and religious texts of all time. So good on you.
Yeah,
guys.
It's like all the people saying that they're of Nazareth.
Yeah.
So, those motherfuckers.
Well done.
Nice try, motherfucker.
It translates. Lao Tzu would translate as old master. Other names that have been given to him also translate as supreme old lord, and my personal favorite, supremely mysterious and primordial emperor. That is the most badass title of all time.
I mean, yeah, that's like something out of like fucking Buck Rogers or something.
That is the best title of all time. Supremely mysterious and primordial emperor. Fuck, man.
Like, well done. I mean, well done.
Well done.
I mean, funny, that's the same name as my penis, but...
Ugh.
Yeah.
Mine's just called the Warhammer.
Some of us prefer grandiosity.
I'm more into the whole brevity thing.
Right, you're not into the whole brevity thing.
No, you're not into the whole brevity thing. Thank you. No, so, I mean, they're all... Just like any other major religious figure in history, there are historians that argue that Lao Tzu never existed, as lore tells it, but, whether the Tao Te Ching is a compilation from multiple authors or the work of an actual historical Lao Tzu, the lore about the man is worth telling.
Absolutely. Well, and actually, if you'd like, this is the reason I brought out the academic version of this book, is that there are basically 4 schools of thought on the historical personage of Lao Tzu.
Take it away, Mr. Cradfield. And
I'm going to just give them briefly. So the first was that Lao Tzu was actually named Lao Tan, and he was from the 6th century BCE. And most notably of this particular theory is that he is an actual person who visited Confucius. During that time period. And also notable there is that he was identical with the grand historian Tan or Tan, Pai Yan. So the second theory is that he lived during the spring and autumn period, but it was not the author of the Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu being also a way that some people will refer to the Tao Te Ching.
Correct. Arguing also then that he lived a bit before Confucius and never visited him, but may not have been expert on ceremonies and such. That's kind of a weird theory. Lao Tzu, the third one, though, is that Lao Tzu lived in the Warring States period, which was around the 5th century BC to the 3rd century BC.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And that he was, again, identical with this grand historian Tan. And then the fourth one is just straight up that Lao Tzu is a legendary figure.
Yeah. My personal favorite being the traditional telling that you see in some texts where he's a scholar who worked as, quote, the keeper of the archives in the imperial court, which again,
I fucking love.
Awesome title. Of course, from ex-librarian and
current librarian,
current and professional librarian. Of course, we fucking love the fact that this dude was a goddamn librarian.
Yeah, and this account, I also noted too in my research, this account actually of that particular title and that particular position comes from a historian named Shi Qi around 90 BCE.
Yes. So after the fact, as is with most religious figures, but
a tertiary source, but still, considered pretty authoritative.
Exactly, and so this would have been the imperial court of Zhu, and he, at the time, he would have had access to all of the great classic writings of the period. And so, this story often tells that he developed this school of thought that would later become Taoism, and attracted a lot of followers in his lifetime. So, as he grew older, there are stories that tell of his son being a great soldier and him witnessing a lot of moral and societal decay. It is said that at the age of 80, Lao Tzu became frustrated with these things that he was witnessing around him and struck out to the west, which was at the time an unsettled frontier in China.
Yeah, it was basically a death sentence.
Yeah, so he struck out to become a hermit. And
in the direction of Tibet, I believe, is how they usually specify.
Tibet and India. So as he was about to exit from the western gate of the capital city, he was stopped by a guard who recognized him as the great teacher that he was, and asked that he would write down his teachings for the good of the country before he left, and these writings would then be the Tao Te Ching as we know it.
And specifically, at least in the version I read, that he implored him to write them down, and he basically gave off this air of indifference. He's fucking fine, and and didn't even agree to it. But as the thing, he didn't even agree to it, and went to bed that night. And the story that I read went when the guard woke up the next morning, he was gone, but had left the writings.
Oh, okay. So I actually read a different one because the one that I read was that Lao Tzu actually asked him for proof that he was a seeker of the Tao in order to transmit these teachings to him. And through questioning, he proved himself worthy. So he wrote down the Tao Te Ching, and the guard was so moved that he actually followed Lao Tzu into the West and became one of his greatest disciples.
Now that's interesting. Okay.
Which, I was about to say, it just goes to show you, there are a bunch of sides to every story.
Yep. I mean, and if you pick up your copy of the Du De Ching, or if you read their kind of introduction, as they put it, they say on his way out, someone stopped Lao Tzu and asked if he would write down the tenets of his ethos before leaving town. Being a lazy man, Lao Tzu lodged his water buffalo against an abutment long enough to write the Tao Te Ching's 81 short verses. When finished, he kicked his water buffalo into gear and, tossing his ringer to the man, rode off into the misty horizon of legend and myth.
Yep. And there are some legends that say that he, in fact, made it to India and became a mentor and tutor of Siddhartha Gautama, who would later become the Buddha. Other writings actually say that Lao Tzu was the Buddha.
Oh, interesting.
And these are a little bit more obscure, but you get a bit of a reach.
I might call that a bit of a reach, but hey, I mean, who am I to say? Fuck it.
Yeah, exactly. This all happened a long time before I was born.
Yeah.
So, by roughly 2,500 years. So, there are a lot of stories about, historical Lao Tzu, but, all of them kind of tend to follow more or less the general path that led us to what is Taoism as we know it.
Yeah.
And now Buddhism as we know it.
And I mean, it's more to note too. I mean, there's one chapter of the Tao Te Ching which could be viewed as somewhat autobiographical. It's chapter 20. It doesn't give you much. And that's the thing. And I'll read just a little bit of it, just for...
He translated as, fuck off, leave me alone!
It actually really could be, in a way, because it also exemplifies the classic kind of ideals of Taoism of sort of almost embracing dualities and not really locking into a single way of thinking. It's a great chapter. It's chapter 20. I'm reading from the Tao Te Ching, his translation of the Tao Te Ching. So... He says, yet there is endless joy to be had. The world is like a great spring feast. I take in the views from high above it all, calm, alone, and expressionless as an unborn infant, with nothing to do and nowhere to go. The people indulge in an abundance of wealth while I appear to have nothing. The people are sharp and clear-minded, whereas I seem confused. The people are confident and assertive, but I look dull and withdrawn. The people are gainfully employed, yet I remain stubbornly idle. My mind is foolish, indeed rather vulgar. Aimless as the restless winds, I seem to have no direction at all. I suppose I am rather different from everyone else, yet I am content. Everything I need is right here. And I can actually kind of see that as someone writing something on their way out of town, frankly. But
everything I need is right here. Not really.
Yeah. But I mean, water buffalo, at least.
Yeah, no, everything I need is in my fucking saddlebags.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's fantastic. I love it.
I mean, a very base reading of that chapter, to be sure. There's allegory upon allegory, of course, that you could dig into. But I don't know. I like to think maybe that's somewhat autobiographical, if there's nothing else in there.
Sure. No, I love it. So yeah. Damn, I keep hitting my beer bottle on my chair, and I'm like, oh, that's going to sound good.
We'll get it in post.
Yeah. So I guess then we should get into just the sort of the basics of what Lao Tzu was about.
Sure.
His teachings emphasize the seeking of the Tao.
Mm-hmm.
The Tao being the ideal of existence, the root of all things. The Tao Te Ching is intended to be a guide to students to live in a natural state of existence, allowing themselves to be in tune with the natural world around them, not altering themselves to become something they're not.
Mm-hmm.
This, of course, goes back to the concept of Wu Wei that we discussed in the last episode.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about a few others too, like embracing of duality is the clear mind is sort of like the simplification of your life sort of deal. Like, I mean, it's like you said, naturalistic point of view.
Yeah, exactly. And through the act of natural existence and behavior, disciples are one with the Tao, and they achieve the concept of the ideal existence,
mm-hmm.
and then they will be freed from the suffering of reincarnation and basically physical existence, becoming one with the Tao.
Right. It's and the phrase I think that's used throughout for the most part, especially for reading translation, is that of the sage.
Mm-hmm.
The sage would be your person who is has reached this level of attunement, basically.
Yeah, a calm sense of being. Living, I actually wrote down, literally verbatim, living free of desires that would put one in conflict with the natural world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he taught simplicity. He taught humility as key virtues in life. These virtues which were sharply in contrast with the concept of selfish action.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically taught humility in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I think a lot of people should listen to.
And a point that we'll be coming back to in the third part of our show.
Oh my god.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Dun 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 dun. We're about to get to the dark shit.
Yeah, well, we'll get to it eventually.
But yeah, I think you have a couple more things to add there just by the way you're flipping through that book.
I think there was one thing I was going to add to that. I don't know. This is about our next segment. Actually, the main one I had was one I just read. Yeah, actually, these are for later. Cool. So we're good.
I mean, yeah, so Lao Tzu, again, just one of the great dudes in history. I've got a couple of quotes that are attributed to him.
And that's one thing to note is that there are many quotes attributed to Lao Tzu. Not all of them are necessarily right, but they're fun nonetheless.
Yeah, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at a certain point, call me Ishmael.
Yeah, exactly. Some of my favorites, though, being when goodness is lost, it is replaced by morality. Again, very relevant in the current conversations.
Very true.
Nature does not hurry, but everything is accomplished.
That brings
very relevant in LA.
Well, that comes back to, that's a very central idea to Wu Wei, which we discussed last week, to be sure.
Exactly.
To be sure.
A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving.
God, ain't that the truth.
Man.
Yeah.
I want to get on a train, man.
Oh, man, you're telling me.
God damn it, I just want to get on a fucking train.
Just go.
And finally, one of my absolute favorites, something that I think about all the time. Music in the soul can be heard by the universe.
Well, and that's a great quote, especially for me personally, because I often, and you'll probably hear me rambling about this at some point on this podcast, I personally tend to equate the idea of the Tao to Tolkien's idea of like a cosmology, essentially, in his work, which revolves around like a musical sort of arrangement, and then discord being introduced into it. I, for one, that one speaks personally to me in a big way. So,
yeah. No, so Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu, yeah.
An amazing
man, people,
idea,
fine. I mean, literally whatever you want it to be, I suppose. I mean, I think that's kind of the point too, right? Is that it can kind of be whatever you want it to be, and he can kind of be, I guess, at this point, whatever the Tao means to you, in a way. Like, that's the fun thing about it not really being a religion, well, at least in its basest form. I mean, there is a religion of Taoism, of course, which kind of deifies Lao Tzu and a couple other key figures. I think both of us are basically not... It's not so much what we're involved with, So, and I've seen breakdowns of Taoism kind of into three main schools of thought. There's like the religious one, there's the kind of like Taoism as philosophy, and then like Taoism as like a practical guide to your way of life. And so, you have the philosophical side, which maybe reads it, people who engage with it in a sort of abstract way. You've got the people who try to integrate it into their life, and that's when you're starting to talk about like Zen martial arts or things like Tai Chi, which we'll be talking about later in the show.
We'll get to that later. That's another episode.
But then there's the actual like kind of codified religious practice, which to my understanding is not the primary way that Taoism is engaged with in the world. I could be wrong about that.
I was about to say, I don't speak from a great position of authority on that subject, so unfortunately I can't really speak to that.
I can't either, but that was the impression I got. I can't remember what I was reading the other day about it, but that's the thing. I think we, for the most part, engage on the philosophical side of things. So
yeah, exactly. So Lao Tzu, great dude in history.
Great dude, and I think the most appropriate starting point
exactly
for this series.
And ironically, somehow this thing that we kind of conceived of as being like mini-sodes originally has turned into an episode that is more than twice as long as our actual episode we recorded last week.
Well, they'll vary a little bit.
This is so great.
Well, on that, well, we've divulged a little bit into tangent stuff. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, look. Hey everyone, Alex here with a little bit of housekeeping. How do you like that transition? Clunky, I know. We're getting better as we go along, I swear. But yeah, so I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping here. First thing I'd like to do is shout out our music. That is by Apache Tomcat. The song is 2 p.m. Wake Up Call. It's off the album Classics by Request. Highly recommend checking that out. Would also like to mention our social media and email address here. Our email is pddcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter. That's at pddcast. And we are also on Facebook, facebook.com/pddcast. So yeah, feel free to drop likes, follow us, all that good stuff. Shoot us an email. We are guessing we're going to get some emails on this episode for the segment coming up. You'll see what I mean when we get there. So anyway, I'd also like to do a quick shout out here to our podcast network. We are part of Unit 24 Productions with our friends, basically, and we put together a few different podcasts. There's some good stuff on the network. So I would recommend checking out our other shows such as Get Off My Lawn, Good Libations, and Your Fave is Problematic. We have more upcoming as well. Those are our current podcasts on the network, along with Purpose Driven Dude, which you're already listening to. So thank you so much for joining us for episode 2. I'm going to go ahead and get us back to the episode here, and see you guys soon for some more housekeeping, I suppose. Keep cool, dudes. Well, I mean, on that note, I guess we should probably then dig into our third section of this podcast, which I'm coming at you with this week.
Getting to the dude of the matter. Yeah. Oh, God, I'm so sorry I just did that. Oh, God damn it.
I can't fix that one in post, man. I just can't.
Jesus, I'm so sorry, folks. I will never do that again.
But anyway, so getting to the do of the matter, I know last week we dug into a bit of a lighter topic, I feel, more or less.
Wow, how many times are you going to be able to say KKK? Lighter topic!
Yeah, I mean, someone who came through that whole experience with a bit of redemption about him. And this week, I feel, is going to be, I mean, it may be challenging, but not quite as redemptive at the end, unfortunately, because I think... Not yet, anyway. And I mean, we have hope on this one. But I think we would be remiss in this day and age if we did not at least talk a little bit about gun control in America. We're recording on the heels of the tragic shooting in Florida. And I gotta say, this particular time around for me, before we even get into any of the dudeness of it, I gotta say, this time around, just the conversation that's actually happening after this one is a bit heartening, it seems. To me, anyway, from what I've been seeing.
The conversations that have happened within the last couple of days involving the survivors of this tragedy has brought me a lot of hope, because it makes me look at young people in this country and say, okay, there are young people in this country who are not on the wrong side of this. There are young people in this country who give me hope for the future of what this debate is going to hold.
Yeah, there's young people, I mean, people who are 16, 17 years old, standing up and literally yelling at their, elected representatives who they couldn't even vote for.
I was about to say, they're doing this thing in front of a crowd of adults, and they can't. They even had to censor themselves doing it. And I'm going to say it now because I'm a 30-something goddamn adult, and I'm going to say this is fucking bullshit. This needs to stop.
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, they're getting up and yelling, we're mad as hell, we're not going to take it anymore. And that I think is one of the most heartening things I've seen in any, because I mean, look, I went to UCSB. I mean, there was a tragic shooting there a couple of years ago, and all we fucking got was thoughts and prayers. And I mean, there's people mad as hell then that got nowhere. And I can only hope that this time around that's different. But I think really what I wanted to look at here in terms of the dude of the matter and the Taoism of it all is there's a couple of different passages in the Tao Te Ching which refer to not only military affairs, but kind of an ideology centered around weaponry and instruments of war. And I really I mean, we're probably going to get flack from someone but I mean, look, a gun is an instrument of war. I don't care what the fuck you say about it. And especially like an AR-15 or some shit like that.
A gun was designed for one purpose.
Yeah, it's for killing. It might be for killing a deer, but it certainly sure as fuck can be used to kill a person. And more times than not, and too often is. Tao Te Ching, chapter 30. So the sage eschews the use of force, for he knows it will only incur retaliation. Where armies encamp, only thorny bushes grow. Great wars are followed by famine. Thus, when fighting cannot be avoided, the sage does only what is necessary and halts immediately thereafter. I think that is particularly poignant to the conversation now. I mean,
absolutely.
It goes beyond gun control debate a little bit, but it's like you shouldn't revel in these sort of things, and I think that's kind of the point.
Violence begets violence, and when you find yourself in a culture where violence is so easily accessible,
mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about video games. I'm not talking about movies. No, fuck that debate. That is a diversion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about where real physical violence in the real world is so prevalent and so easily attained.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is where you have to draw that line. And I mean, I'm speaking as a person who came from a position where I was around guns a lot growing up.
Same, and that's
I own a gun.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I've never fired it, not once in the entire time that I've owned it, but I do own one. And the thing is, like, it's not an AR-15. It is not a tool of war.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many times where people will take these tools of war and use them so recklessly. And yeah, as that says, violence, basically what that boils down to is violence begets violence.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And when you're in a position where violence is so easily attainable as a solution to your problem.
Exactly. And look, actually, it's funny you mention it that way, because that's actually almost exactly what the Tao Te Ching says, chapter 57. I'm kind of skipping ahead here. But it says, so great governors make forthright plans, great generals make deceptive plans, but great sages refuse to make any plans at all. This is how they rule the world. How is this a strategy for leadership? Because the more plans and prohibitions we make, the more the people grow impoverished. And the more powerful profit from war and weaponry, the more the nation grows chaotic. And I think that says it in a nutshell. Yeah. I mean, like, there's no way around it. And it's profiteering. I personally think it's profiteering. Just plain and simple.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, there's no way. I mean, even the family of the man who invented the AR-15 has said that he never intended it to be in the hands of a civilian populace.
Yeah.
So, sorry, folks. I know that you're probably not going to like me for this, or at least some of you aren't. You have no business owning military-grade firearms in everyday society in the United States. Get the fuck over it.
I agree. And I think it's important to note that the people who, throughout history too, who have invented, means of war, right? Like Andrew Carnegie is a great example coming from a library perspective, right? Like the man invented one of the most destructive things on the planet and spent the last part of his life trying to like reconcile that. And you mentioned the inventor of the AR-15. It's similar to the inventor of the AK-47 assault rifle, who has been decorated over and over and over again by the former Soviet Union and now Russia. And he is like almost like embarrassed of himself at this point for inventing something that's been used for so much destruction, so much bloodshed. So, yeah, I think the due to the matter really on this one is that, reveling in violence and reveling in war and reveling in instruments of war is completely counter to Dudism, Taoism, and I really believe any life, any sane person
really just reveling in the instruments of war is counterproductive to just peace of mind in living.
Yeah.
I really don't know how to expound upon that.
I think it's pretty straightforward. And I mean, and as you said, like, I grew up with guns. I grew up in the Scouts. I grew up in what I like to refer to as Red State, California. You know, like, I grew up shooting from a pretty young age, you know? Yeah. And don't
get me wrong. I enjoy target shooting.
I do too. I
fucking hate hunting. Not for any sort of like moralistic reason. Just because I have to get up really fucking early in the morning and go out in the cold and like sit around and wait for an animal to wander past that I'm allowed to shoot. Like
just like sheer laziness, essentially.
I fucking hate, you know. For all of you people who go out and hunt and actually like use the animal that you hunt, not trophy hunters, but like people who will like shoot a deer and, you know, use its meat to make, you know, venison in its various delicious forms and make sausage and, you know, in its various delicious forms. And you know, you may even use the hide or the pelt, whether you're using it for a trophy or you know, with something or other.
Make a blanket, or I mean, I don't know, whatever you want to do with it.
Or a rug or something.
But you use it, yeah.
But yeah, no, good on you guys.
Yeah, and I've actually always wanted to do that. I've never been hunting. I would at least like to try it. You know?
I've been hunting a few times, and personally, wasn't really my bag. Not judging the people who do it.
No, and I think it's, you know, again, like, if you're into sport hunting like that, I mean, more power to you.
Go for it. I love fishing.
I like fishing too, but that's the thing. I grew up shooting. I went through Scouts. I did all 3 of the shooting badges. Archery was my personal favorite, but I was actually really good at shotgun.
By the way, if you hunt with a bow, fucking good on you.
Yeah, holy shit, man.
If you hunt boar with a bow, you're fucking insane.
Yeah, you're a crazy motherfucker.
You are.
And you have my undying respect.
You have my undying respect and also a little bit of judgment because I think you're goddamn insane.
But I mean, way to go for leveling that playing field a bit. I mean... but I mean, that's the thing. It's like I was
scared of boar, and I live in fucking LA.
I know, right? It's a legit fear, to be sure. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, I for a long time was incredibly proud that I had qualified as NRA sharpshooter with shotgun back in Scouts. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I definitely enjoy shooting just as much as and that's the thing. So I don't want people to think that we're coming at this from the perspective of someone who's like never touched a gun or some
or
you know, LA
like
liberals
like
or something like that.
Anti-gun or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we are liberal people who live in LA, but I mean, it's not to say that we don't have a background in this sort of stuff. And that's the thing. Like, when I was growing up, like, the idea of shooting like even a semi-automatic rifle, I was like, where's the skill? Like, I wanted to have a bolt-action rifle that I actually had to get good with, you know, because I enjoyed the actual skill of the shooting. You know?
The one exception I will make is the time I got to shoot an M1 Garand that was actually manufactured during World War II.
I mean, like, that's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. I'm left-handed, so it was very difficult because I had a very hot shell casing flying past my right eye every time I pulled that trigger.
I'm left-handed too, so that is a perpetual problem every time I've ever been shooting.
Black powder, not great for me. But I've tried, and I love it so much. Oh my god, it's so hard to find a left-handed black powder rifle.
Yeah, it's damn well near impossible. And that's the thing. And so that's the thing. Like, we both are people who grew up shooting, who have gone shooting multiple times. But I see no reason in owning military-grade equipment. Like,
nope.
It seems just completely ridiculous to me.
Yeah, exactly. So, and as we've said, like, this ties back around to dudism. We're not just going on a rant. This is not some sort of political thing. This is purely a what the fuck. This is human life. Mm-hmm. Please, no more.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, with any great philosophy in the world or any great religion, sanctity of human life is, like, first and foremost.
Sorry. You know, Christians, listen to us.
Yeah, or, I mean, yeah, but that's the thing, like, any religion that you look at, it's sanctity of life.
Sorry, I'm also coming at that whole thing where I was raised Baptist.
I mean, I was raised Presbyterian, and, like, they hammer that
Chill Baptists.
Chill Baptists. The kind of whatever Baptist.
Yeah. The Church of England of Baptists.
Basically. Calvinists. But yeah, so, I mean, we don't have to go too far beyond that. It's just to say, and I think we made the Taoist point and the Dudist point pretty clear. So.
Exactly. So I feel like I need to find just some sort of like light note to kind of just like take us back up before we go out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I'm so sorry. I just keep making hand gestures even though this is an audible medium. So if you hear like a that is me waving my hands past the microphone.
I won't be editing those out.
Because, I still can't remember. I got a degree in theater. I still can't remember what fucking medium I'm working in.
That's fine.
So, I mean, we're going to be coming back with another episode next week. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be yet. But I just want to thank everyone if you're listening and you're sticking with us up until this point. I'm really excited to see where this goes because I think we've got a lot of really positive material. Last segment aside,
but I mean, that's the thing. Like, and we said last episode that we don't aim for this to be a particularly downer. Like, we're not looking for problematic faves. You know, we're not.
Right. It's like we're not looking to. What we're looking for is to bring goodness into the world,
right,
and positivity into the world. And so...
But sometimes that requires staring at the fucking darkness for a second, you know?
Exactly. Personally, staring into the fucking darkness, I'm reading a lot of H.P. Lovecraft right now. It's just a rabbit hole that I go down every now and then, and I do apologize if I get really fucking dismal.
I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but I go down that rabbit hole at least once a day anyway, and that's just my personality. It'll come out eventually in this thing, don't worry.
But so I'm just trying to think of something to take us out on like a really good positive note. Go back, look up some Fred Rogers clips on YouTube.
Look up his. You mentioned it earlier. Look up his speech before Congress.
His speech before Congress in defense of the funding for public media. Absolutely one of the most inspiring things I think you're going to watch today.
And it's one of the sort of things. If you haven't seen it but you've seen his show, highly recommend it because you maybe didn't always get it from his TV content, but that speech is one of the most articulate speeches I have ever watched. Like, it is just it's a rousing speech.
It's one of the most moving pieces of oratory I have ever witnessed, and I have been in multiple Shakespeare plays.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
Fred Rogers outdid Shakespeare.
Wow. Bold claim. Maybe that's what we end on then. A bold claim.
A bold claim. Now, I guess, fuck it, dude.
Fuck it, dude.
Let's go bowling.
Yeah.